Welcome to the first episode of what we like to call the Unwatched Pile. And as I've described in episodes Chasing Labels, basically what this is every month we will put out a poll in the Facebook group that is for Chasing Labels, and me and Andrew both give you a chunk of movies that we both have in our collections that we have not watched yet. And, you know, we do that sometimes. We have blind buys, you know, we don't get around to stuff. And so you're going to help us decide on what to watch. And so this past month we voted, and this is our first episode. And we'll have me talking about, and we'll chat about the movies if we've seen them both. But you guys voted on me watching the Akira Kurosawa film Ran, and which is the Studio Canal edition, and then also the Criterion edition of the film Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, which is by the director Elio, I can't speak, Elio Petri. And Andrew, what do you got to talk about today?
I have two films that have been sitting in my collection for many, many years, probably a decade. That would be Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris and François Truffaut's The Last Metro, early Blu-ray releases from Criterion. So that's something that I was super glad to finally get the inspiration, get the momentum and motivation to look into.
Yeah, I mean that's part of what's great about this. I mean, it makes us have to watch it because you told us to.
That's true.
You know,
we were going to get to it eventually.
I mean, like, of course we would hopefully get to it eventually, but it's like if we make it part of like almost like I wouldn't say it's a job, but if it's like if we make it part of this show, which we take very seriously, it kind of puts us in the right direction. It makes us start watching stuff we need to watch. And of course, hopefully interact with you guys more. So, but I guess to start it out, and really, you know, this show can evolve over time. We'll figure out the best way to do this, but we don't want this to be too long of a show. We want it to be maybe under an hour. And it's relatively just us reviewing the film, the releases we got. So, I guess do you want me to start, or do you want to start, or
actually, you start, because I'm fascinated by what you're going to say. Okay.
Well, one thing I'll say overall, the two films I got here, Ron and Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, to me, it ended up being a really cool double feature, because ultimately, both of these films are kind of about how power can corrupt people. You know, in Ron, you have this I guess you could say warlord who decides to basically retire and hand off his kingdom to his sons, and then suddenly you find out his sons basically let the power corrupt them, and they all kind of turn against each other. And in Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, it's about a newly promoted police chief who then commits a murder, and then just basically, well, first he puts it off on other people, and then he tries to point it all towards himself, and then shows that he can get away with it. So yeah, both of these films are kind of about how people with a lot of power do terrible things, and the reason they do terrible things is they know they can get away with it. And that's more investigation, but like Ron also is about how sometimes that family loyalty can be corrupted by power. You know, like, who can you trust more than family? But when you give family almost all the power you want, they turned against each other in the film Ron. But I guess I'll start with Ron. This was an Akira Kurosawa film that everybody told me I needed to watch, of course, like for years. And I've seen a few things of his. I've seen like High and Low. I've seen, of course, Seven Samurai, and a lot more of his early stuff. I haven't seen a lot of his later stuff, like Dreams is one that people tell me I need to watch. So this was actually my first color film of Akira Kurosawa. And it's just as magical as watching one of his black and white films. One of the things that I think Akira Kurosawa does really well is get a lot out of one shot. Like, when he does one shot, he gets so much in the frame without overstuffing it, and it all looks fantastic. it's a portrait. It looks amazing, and then of course now adding color to that, it just makes it even more interesting. And the way he uses color in this film is a lot of reds, of course. He really, the blues, the way he uses a lot of sunsets and a lot of, it's just a very, very enthralling film. And, he's known for doing these kind of epic historic, war films and things like that. And this is definitely one of his best that I've seen. And, I've went through the features as much as I could. There's some of these features that were pretty lengthy on here. There were some that were like 40 minutes long to over an hour long. I watched a lot of the interviews, and because they had an interview on this disc from 2015 where they screened this, and you had like some of the main cast there. Tatsu Nakade was there. He's well into, I think he's to his 80s by now. Still very vibrant in that interview, and they all, of course, talk about how much of a master Akira Kurosawa was, how much time, and specifically with Akira Kurosawa, his film shoots a lot of times were very long, and they cost a lot of money, and he was very known for like putting a lot of prep into just one scene. There was a particular scene where a character gets beheaded, and apparently they took 3 months prepping that one scene, that, of just coming in, quick chat for a second, and then cutting her head off. And it's like, that took 3 months to get that, but it sounds like he really wanted everybody to know the meaning behind every scene, and he took the time to share that with his crew and everybody involved. And, I think, Andrew, you've seen this obviously, and
I have,
and you can speak probably a little bit better, because of course, these are the first times we're watching this, so we can't be like too in depth about our feelings about everything about these movies. But this was at a later part of Kurosawa's career where he had actually had a lot of misses. Right? He was kind of this was like after he'd had like a suicide scare, or he tried to commit suicide, I think. There was like Kagemusha was like the next film after that, I believe, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this came out in 1985. So I think when people think of Akira Kurosawa, they think of the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah,
for the most part.
Yeah.
And he made movies all the way up from the 40s until he passed away in, I believe, 1998.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was making movies all the way up through the 90s for the most part. His last movie was Matadeo from 1993. But Ran is one of his most iconic movies. I mean, I think chances are you've seen certain clips from it. There's always that one clip of, the main character, the father figure, walking just out of these gates, I believe, and there's just pure warfare and chaos behind him and explosions. What I think is most unique about this movie is, you said it is in color, and the colors must look amazing.
Yes,
on this 4K.
Yeah, very
because
good 4K.
Because it's such a colorful film.
Yeah, there on the 4K disc, there's only one feature, and and it is the restoration feature, where they show kind of like a lot of side by side. And what's funny is, we kind of talked about this with another reference to our Bill Lustig episode that you guys never saw. What's funny is, how we're getting a lot of people complain about like the look of the movie being teal. Like people complain that the new when a new, like for instance, Bull Durham came out, and people said it looked a lot more teal than it used to look. Like
I remember you saying that with. Oh my goodness. The film that we did a spotlight on back in the day, the John Schlesinger film. I remember you saying that about the Criterion edition, Midnight Cowboy.
Yes, that was another one people said that about too. And what's funny is when you look at the restoration, the original kind of like look of the movie was very much more teal, and then when they did the restoration, a lot of that teal left it, which is kind of the opposite of what we hear was when the restorations happen, a lot of times that teal comes out. There was a lot more of a blueness to the look of it, and then the vibrancy comes out more in this new restoration. It looks like a lot more natural looking. And I'm assuming that's the way. I mean, because the cinematographer was involved in, I think, the restoration of this. He's still around, and so yeah. I mean, but it looks amazing. It looks great. And
the Studio Canal release, the 4K release, it is region free.
Yes.
But it's still only sold really overseas for them. I mean, you can get it here, but there's no 4K UHD edition of Ran here currently. The edition I have is the Studio Canal release put out by Lionsgate here in the US back from 2010. That's what I have. So that, of course, is incredibly outdated by today's standards, and of course with this, they did a new 4K restoration a few years ago. That's where they got the aesthetic for that release, and the movie itself is just a stunning epic. And I'm curious who is going to release it here. I'm hoping it's not Lionsgate. Not that I have anything against Lionsgate, but they have the rights to Studio Canal stuff here in the US.
Yeah.
And I think they still have the rights here. Which is, they basically just re-released the same disc that was put out overseas. I mean, I wouldn't mind that. That would be kind of nice. But I would hoping someone else maybe would have the release. I mean, I think the wish is that Criterion gets the rights back.
Yeah.
Because it is part of the collection. And that DVD, I know, shows up in so many people's collections. I remember first looking into Criterion over a decade ago and looking at YouTube videos, and everyone seemingly had the DVD of Ran in their collection. And if you're a completist, I guess you kind of need it. It's such an epic, incredible movie. It's an adaptation of William Shakespeare's play King Lear. So it's not the first time Akira Kurosawa is adapting Shakespeare.
Well, and it's also actually somewhat inspired by a real life legend too. It's not, apparently he started writing it, and as he went through the first draft, he then realized how close it was to the King Lear story.
Right.
So it was kind of like, it started out as a totally different thing, but then he realized how close it was, and then was like, okay, well, now I'm going to kind of like maybe fuse it more with the King Lear story to make it official.
Yeah, and I mean, that story happens so many times throughout history where a king dies and the succession of who takes power is just a mess. Just an absolute mess. It's happened with British monarchs. It happened with Charlemagne. It was very similar to Charlemagne, where like all of his children wanted stuff. And it was just a mess. So you dig the movie. So you
yes,
really
I do. It's like I said,
it wasn't overhyped.
These are first time watches. So it takes time to take. Sometimes it takes me a couple times to watch something and really like connect with it. Especially when it's something you have to read. And there's nothing wrong. Obviously, we don't. Right. I'm not saying anything bad about international cinema in any way where I have to read it. I don't mind that stuff, but sometimes it does take a little bit. Like once you've seen it once and you kind of and you had to read the subtitles and you understand what's happening through the characters, then I can pay attention to the visuals a little more, and some of that stuff that I missed maybe the first time around, I'll get the second time. And so, but overall, the first time I watched it, my experience was great. It was just an epic movie. I mean, the set, like the locations, and so many extras in the film. Like, and there were extras. There's no CGI going on here.
Oh no,
just full on
CGI existed, but he obviously didn't use it.
yeah, full on battle scenes.
Epic battle scenes.
Yeah, Natsu Nakade talked about learning how to ride a horse in one of the features, and like having to learn how to shoot an arrow off of a horse for at least 3 seconds. He's like, we need you to do it just to get like a 3-second shot.
Nice.
And but he's at least at this point, he's been one of my favorite Japanese actors, and seeing him in this, he was apparently 49 when he shot this film, but he was supposed to be like 80 3 in the
Oh,
movie. So
oh
they
yeah,
had
they
to put
used makeup and stuff.
yeah, they said it took like I think he said it was maybe 3 or 4 hours of makeup, and he said that there would be times where they were like almost through the whole makeup process, and then Akira Kurosawa would come in and be like, "Yeah, I'm drunk, I'm hungover, I can't, we're not shooting today," and then so he'd be like, "Fuck," like
Yeah, I know. All those hours
all them
wasted.
time putting on that makeup, and now we're not shooting today, so great. But they all seem like they have a lot of respect for him, and of course, as being and he'd worked with him many times before, so he knew what he was getting himself into. And
Yeah, a lot of the actors who had worked with Kurosawa worked with him repeatedly. We talk about Toshiro Mifune all the time.
yeah,
Takashi Shimura is another actor. He was in like Akira and Seven Samurai, a bunch of other films as well. Just really iconic Japanese actors working with him throughout his career. But I guess, putting Ran aside, do you want to go on to the next film?
I
Or
figured
should
we go
I
to
take over?
go to one of yours next.
Okay,
Go back
sure.
and forth. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll start out with a big, heavy one. I think this one definitely took the poll by storm, and for understandable reason. This is Solaris by Andrei Tarkovsky, an iconic film, a film that I'm pretty sure is in everyone's collection and has been seen by many, many cinephiles throughout the ages. This came out in 1972. Coincidentally, I believe this is, if my math is correct, which it hardly ever is, it's the 50th anniversary of this film
Okay.
or so.
Yeah,
So
it
I'm
sounds about
very
right.
curious
Close.
why they didn't give this a nice re-release now.
Well, maybe they will. We still got this rest of this year.
They would have told us or teased us by now. I
You
hope.
think?
This would I will say this would be an interesting candidate for Criterion's UHD stuff that they're doing now. But this film, as all Tarkovsky films are, is unique beyond unique. It's a film that is part sci-fi, very philosophical, theological, dramatic, and just very fascinating and endlessly engrossing. So the premise of the film is that there is this planet called Solaris, and there is this that kind of a space station type thing, station that's orbiting it and studying it and all that stuff. And there's just been odd things going on with it. They've been getting transmissions from the 3-person crew that's from there, and things are not quite right. So they send this psychiatrist, Chris Kelvin, to go and see what's going on and if they should continue this program or not. And what ends up happening is he gets there and things are exactly as odd as one would think it is. The station is in disarray and all this kind of stuff. And what happens is there's just supernatural things going on, and it's kind of never explained what's going on. And these doctors that are there are kind of just they've been mentally overtaken by some existential force. Something has happened there, and it's very similar to a lot of sci-fi that we've seen now. I wouldn't be surprised if it's heavily influential on other sci-fi books and things. It reminded me a lot of Event Horizon, but you take away kind of the horror aspects of it. And Annihilation, the Alex Garland film, which came out a couple of years ago, which I really loved, reminded me a lot of that. Just the whole avant-garde art house vibe to it, which of course Tarkovsky is well known for. And it's really engrossing, incredibly well crafted. Like, the film is so detailed in its aesthetic because you're inside of this station the whole time, so you really have to feel as if this place is lived in and messed up and just unhinged, and you get that, and just wonderfully done. It is based off of a book called Solaris. Coincidentally, well, not really coincidentally, interestingly enough, the author wasn't a big fan of this interpretation, specifically the ending, because Tarkovsky kind of just took what was in that book, kind of did his own thing with it, a la Stanley Kubrick with The Shining, something like that. Very Shining vibes in here as well, in the sense that you don't know what's real, what's not real, where we actually are. You don't know if this is reality or another dimension or an afterlife of some kind. It really leaves you questioning so many things, and there's so many interpretations and layers to this movie thematically. I was just blown away by it. And, I've delved a little bit into Tarkovsky's work. I've seen Ivan's Childhood, I've seen Stalker, and I've seen his last film, which I think is not Winter. It's his last film is The Sacrifice. So I've seen that. And it's just, all of his films are so engrossing. And yeah, the aesthetic in the film, I was expecting it to be similar to 2001 A Space Odyssey, and it's very much the opposite of that. Whereas 2001 A Space Odyssey is very science fiction-y. It's all about kind of like, man versus technology, and there's conflict there. This is more like, humanity versus itself. And all of those things, the temptations, the wants and needs and sacrifices and things like that. It's just an incredibly dense film. And I think that's what Tarkovsky's films are. That's why I don't watch them too often, because afterward I feel like I need a recovery time. Like I feel as if I need a day or two to recover. So going through the special features in here was like going through the movie again with all of the psychological weight, because there's 2 hours and 10 minutes worth of special features on here, and you get interviews by all kinds of people. There is an audio commentary by Tarkovsky scholars, which I didn't get to go through. I know Steve and I talked about audio commentaries and how for first time watchers that kind of not really the best thing you can go through, just because you want to get a sense of absorbing the films yourself.
Yeah, well, we wish we had the time to really give you like a complete overall like deep dive into a Blu-ray review here, but I don't think most people, unless they've had the Blu-ray for a long, long, long time and watched it multiple times, are not going to watch and even read the booklet. I mean, it takes a lot of investment of time to do all of that.
Oh yeah, and these early Criterion releases, I forget
how stacked
they are with rich material. Like I said, roughly 2 hours and 10 minutes worth of stuff. They had 25 minutes of deleted scenes or alternate scenes in and of itself. There's a 33-minute interview with the actress in the film. There's an interview with the cinematographer. There's an interview with production designer, and all of these go for 33, 34 minutes, 17 minutes, 22 minutes. And they even have like excerpts of interviews with like a 5-minute one with the author and whatnot. And it's really a deluxe packaging, and a lot of it is, of course, they were porting over all of the old special features from the DVDs when they started coming out with the Blu-rays, and they were just re-releasing them, and they're still re-releasing a lot of their DVDs to Blu-ray upgrades. But this was one that came out in 2011, and that's probably around the time where I bought it myself. Steve, do you have this in your collection? And have
Actually,
you seen it?
I was going to say at the beginning when you said I don't have it.
Okay.
But I have seen it. I've seen it. Was a long time ago. I watched this a lot because back when I first discovered the remake that has George Clooney in it, and I got it. I was interested, and then I realized that it had been remade, so I went and seeked out the original, not knowing anything about Tarkovsky or anything like that. So I just watched the original, and I was like, of course, out of my league at the time. Like, I didn't know what the hell I was watching. I remember getting the sense of like how isolating the movie was, like how much it really makes you feel like, as you said, like maybe you're in another dimension or world, like it, and makes you feel very kind of unnerving, throughout the whole film.
Unpredictable. Yeah, it's a very unpredictable film.
Yeah, and it makes you almost feel like you're in an alien world, even though you're stuck on like a space station. And you're, like that's where you're at, you're in one place,
and everything looks like the same, like the space station is just a circle. So you're just going around in a circle the whole time. And everything's kind of like, what's interesting is, whereas, like I was mentioning 2001, everything looked shiny and futuristic and, pretty, with the aesthetic. This is the exact opposite aesthetic. Everything looks like like old and
Yeah.
broken down and barely functioning and not not shiny and new. It
Yeah.
looks like this place has been here forever and just and like no one's taking care of it. Like it
Yeah.
just looks like it's just been sitting here like derelict. Like say it's like a project you forgot about.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, so there's so much in this film to discuss. Obviously, we could do a whole episode just on this, but that's Solaris in a nutshell. And the Blu-ray looks good, aesthetically and sound wise, because the sound in this movie is so unique. They actually interview the composer, and he gets into what his ideas were behind creating the specific sound and score for the movie, and that score is gets in your head.
Yeah.
It really gets in your head, and it's just incredibly well done. Like I said, the movie does look good. It is an older transfer, with just a high definition digital restoration. Nothing. I mean, back in the over 10 years ago, people weren't talking about 4K restorations
Yeah.
or 2K restorations or
Not quite
anything
yet.
like that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, this is prime. This is prime for a re-release, and I would definitely welcome it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, I guess going on to my next one that I've already kind of talked
Yes.
about roughly is Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion by filmmaker Elio Petri. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but either way. So yeah, like as I kind of described before, this is about a newly promoted police chief who kind of he murders his mistress and then goes to basically leave clues, behind so he could easily be caught. But then he kind of as he starts investigating, he starts to push it off on other people, and then when the clues start to lead back to him, he then shows to everybody that he can still get away with it. And obviously in today's world where there's a lot of things going on around, the state of, the police and how much power they should have and how much they should be funded and all that stuff like that, this film really stands out as something very relevant today. Tapping into that idea of power corrupts and, how much power should the police have, and this of course shows a very negative view of that, where even in I guess we're trying not to spoil the movie too much. I mean, it's kind of not a hard movie to really. It's not really a spoilery type of movie, but like at the end of the movie, his superiors, he admits his him being the murderer to his
Spoiler
superiors.
alert.
Spoiler, I guess, and. It's not like it's a goddamn Marvel movie. Who cares? And they just say, hey, you didn't do it. Like, they just let him get away with it, and then it goes, and then there's the second part of that ending I won't spoil, but, like, it really taps into that how society kind of lets the normal citizens down a lot of times, because there's a lot of people that want everybody to kind of fall in line and do things their way, and there's literally a speech in the middle, like near the beginning of the movie, where he's talking to a bunch of people, and it's a very almost like Nazi-esque type of speech where he's talking about how people need to be repressed. We need to repress the people. It's our job to do that, and it's very powerful and. Very kind of disturbing in a way that everybody cheers at it afterwards. And the lead actor in the film, if I can find his name here, I think it's Mario Vallanti.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
Gian Maria Volante.
Yeah, and
Volante.
I called him, as I was watching the movie, I called him Italian John Hamm.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because he kind of looks like John Hamm, but like obviously kind of very Italian. But he's fantastic in the movie. He puts on a really great performance, and yeah, it's a very powerful movie. The director, this is the first time I've seen one of his films that I'm aware of. And there's features on this that go through his whole career. It's like an 80-minute long feature, so I did not watch that one, but I will. And but because this director has got me interested, and I watched one of the features in this was an interview with him with a film critic, conducted by a film critic, and it was a very good. You got the sense that Petri's however you say his last name, was a very open-minded and well-respected director. Like, he was very educated and very much into, like, you know, wanting to do social and political commentary, but in a way that was like a way that people could understand it, and like it was in your face. Like, he wasn't like trying to be too subtle. Like, that was his way of getting to his audience. And of course, back then, movies like that were a lot more well respected as well. Nowadays, when people hear about politics in their movies, they don't want to watch it, which is interesting. You know,
ironically,
yeah. You know, nobody wants to hear about this stuff. They only want their entertainment.
Yeah, it's ironic because as we look at movies, politics have always been in movies,
and they're even in the Marvel movies.
Yeah, there's always
they're
been
just
a social
not
message
about that
in
necessarily.
most movies, there's always been a social message.
Yeah,
but I've seen the film years ago, and I can echo what Steven says, is that it's a really great film that's only become now even more, relevant in today's society because of the whole discussion we've had about law enforcement over the last several years, and this idea that no one should be above the law, regardless of your status within society or even within law enforcement in and of itself. And I mean, there's no big secret that corruption exists in pretty much every major institution, ever. There's always corruption. Yeah. There's corruption in religion, politics, sports, everywhere. There's always something going on. People are always getting away with things that they shouldn't be getting away with, and it happens. And this film is kind of pointing out the ridiculousness of it, where there are obvious signs that this person has committed such and such a crime, and it just gets ignored because, a police officer or a detective, they can't commit a crime. They're a detective. They're a police officer. Yeah. They can't do that. But it's like, yeah, they can, because they're human, and humans are really capable of doing anything at any point, regardless of who they are. Yeah. And this is a really good release. This was one of the releases that came out in 2013 during that period where Criterion was doing their dual format editions, which I will champion forever. Yeah. The Blu-ray and DVD combo packs. So this is one of the thicker sets, where I believe it's a 3-disc, it's 1 Blu-ray and 2 DVDs, and I always love those sets. I still to this day love them, and there's still a few more of them I want to get. But like Steven said, it is a loaded special features package where, the crown jewel of that is that 80-minute, about the filmmaker, and there's a 55-minute documentary focusing on the life and career of that actor. Yeah. Gian Maria Volante.
And there's also Ennio Morricone did the music for the film.
Yes, he did. And there's a special
feature in there for him as well.
20 minutes. Yep. Yeah.
So
this is a really deluxe packaging, and it's the only film from this director that Criterion has put out.
Okay.
So far, which I'm curious if they're going to put out more. They always put out kind of like these one-offs. Always fascinate me. It's like they put out one, and it's like, I need more. Where do I get more of these?
Are you telling me this is the best of their work, or is it like, or is it just hard to find his other work?
Yeah, are these other ones, held up in rights in other places, or are they just not, are the elements not there, or whatever the case may be? But this is definitely a relative, not a hidden gem. I think people know it by now, but if you don't know this movie, it's worth buying.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not really, I mean, it is and it isn't, because this was a very well received movie. Like, it won the jury prize at Cannes Film Festival in 1970 for Best Film and Best Actor. And
it won an Oscar.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the United States, it also won Best Foreign Language Film, and then the writer and the director, who were the co-writers, got nominated for Best Screenplay.
Yes.
So
So
yeah,
that just tells you how good the screenplay is. It's a
yeah,
fantastic screenplay.
it's definitely amongst cinephiles. It's probably something that I'm just getting around to it, but a lot of people have seen. So, but yeah, that's Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion. And lastly, we have Andrew's last one, which is The Last
My
Metro.
last one, which is probably ironically one of the first Blu-rays I ever bought, at the Barnes and Noble Criterion sale. I may have bought this the second time I went there. This is one of the earliest Blu-ray releases from Criterion, and this is François Truffaut's The Last Metro. And for those of you looking at the live stream right now, you can tell that it is a unique packaging because their first crop of Blu-rays didn't come in their usual, clear plastic Blu-ray cases. No, it came in thin packs with slipcovers over the top, and that's how it was done. So they re-released many of these later on with traditional packaging, but their first crop where it was the Thin Man or I think The Man Who Fell to Earth was a thicker packaging because that I think came with a book. I know the DVD came with a book, but this was one of the first top 10 that they ever released. This came out in 2009. This Blu-ray came out, so I am endlessly fascinated if this is going to get a re-release by someone at some point. Because I'm not saying it could use it because it still looks stunning, but this film has such a beautiful aesthetic to it. But before I get into all of that, this film is a film by François Truffaut, came out in 1980. It's his third to last film that he did before he passed away in 1984, and it's really a gorgeous film. It's aesthetically gorgeous. The film was shot in kind of this two-tone monochrome type aesthetic where everything is in reds or browns, this really kind of earthy colors and stuff like that. They only really use like blues and lighter colors when it's like outside or in or at night. The movie takes place mostly at night. So at night, they would actually, I was watching the special features, they would paint the street lamps like blue on purpose to get a blue aesthetic for the streets and stuff like that. But this film takes place in 1942 during the Nazi occupation of France. And there's this woman played by Catherine Deneuve who is running a local theater, and her husband has been exiled he left, supposedly because he is Jewish. And of course, at that time, the Nazis were rounding up as many Jewish people as they possibly could to, send them to concentration camps or whatnot and just do terrible things. And so she's running this by herself, and then Gerard Depardieu is an actor who is starting out there for the first time. He's like a big time actor who's kind of moved down to a smaller theater experience and whatnot. So we open the film with him, going to the theater and being introduced and whatnot. They have this type of relationship and a romance that goes on throughout the film, and it's contentious, it's flirtatious, it's all of those things, but but a lot of what the film is depicting is kind of just the dramatic uneasiness and just the tension that existed in that world at the time because of the Nazi occupation, because there was so much restriction when it comes to what you could or could not put on in terms of a play, which you could not hire when it comes to actors and actresses, and if a play was deemed to be too quote unquote Jewish or whatever, the authorities would come after you. It was really kind of, you were at the whim of whatever the Nazis wanted. And this film is just going through all of that tension in life and all those kind of stuff while trying to put on a play. I won't get into any of the spoilers as to what happens with her husband character in the film. I'll just say that plays a heavy role in it as well. Because he may be exiled, but other things are going on as well, and you're focused on Catherine Deneuve and Gerard Depardieu and what's going on with them, mostly Catherine Deneuve's character. She's more fixtured in the film than I would say Gerard Depardieu. But it's a really like good solid film. I really liked it a lot. The film it's not really overstating what it is. It's not trying to make a supreme political statement, but obviously the politics are in there. We were just talking about it. This is World War II. This is, Nazi occupied France. Chances are politics are going to play a part in it. It's not going to.
Well, also François Truffaut
being,
a film film writer, and somebody that's being a film writer, obviously opinionated and steeped in the culture. So he's definitely always going to put a lot of that stuff in his films.
Well,
he
not
always
only
did.
that, he grew up during that period.
Oh yeah.
I
was gonna say, I've seen a lot of his earlier work, and then like I've seen Day for Night, and then I've seen stuff like of course 400 Blows, Jules and Jim.
Yes.
Some of the early stuff, but I have not seen something as late as this. So
yeah, and you brought up all of those films. I think we just talked about Akira Kurosawa not really utilizing color too much throughout his career, kind of more later on. And I would say François Truffaut was the same way. If you think about Jules and Jim, and if you think about 400 Blows and all the Antoine Duaniel films and Soft Skin and all these other films, they're all black and white. Yeah. And then when it came to The Last Metro, they knew they had to do it in color, but he was so resistant to that idea that he purposely made the film, with a limited amount of color, like with only the two-tone, the reds and the browns, and the monochrome and whatnot. What is interesting is that Tarkovsky did the same thing in Solaris to an extent, where the early scenes in that movie have this monochrome, just metallic look to them. It's not quite black and white. It's not quite, it had a very steel look to it. Like it was gray and black. It was just really, really unique aesthetic. And both of these directors, just to kind of connect these two films, are dealing with a very unique, specific aesthetic for these movies. And The Last Metro is, no exception to that. And I was thinking about François Truffaut. He grew up during the Nazi occupation. He was born in, I think, 1932. So obviously he would be, 10, his early years, 10 to 15 years old or so, during the time period he's kind of covering in this movie. And it's just a very unique kind of almost slice of life, or a harsh slice of life and an interesting slice of life, but it's very localized. You're not getting like, there's no war scenes, there's no bombing scenes, there's none of that. You get bomb scares where like the sirens will go off and people will have to huddle in shelters and stuff, but you don't see bombs drop, you don't see, gunfire happening in the streets, and you don't really get the news of what's going on in the war. I mean, it being 1942, you really wouldn't get the liberation of France until 1944, so you're kind of in the early stages of really the United States getting involved in the World War II and whatnot. That's all historical stuff, but I'd just like to put all that in context, because the movie really doesn't give you that context, because it's so focused on these people and what they're doing and just living their lives and trying to survive, essentially, and trying to preserve the art and entertainment of French life that was such a big part of the culture. Because I don't know if you know this, Stephen, about Nazis. They don't really like stuff that's expressionistic or artistic when it comes to representation and other cultures that aren't their own.
Well,
they really don't like a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I'll make a reference to apparently not a great movie. I remember falling asleep in this movie, The Monuments Men.
Yes.
Yeah,
which
is very much about how the Nazis were trying to destroy a bunch of art.
Oh yeah, and they did. They destroyed a lot of art. They took a lot of movies specifically from German, history or early part of German cinema, and just kind of, got rid of them. Yeah. The Grand Illusion, which is an anti-war film. They obviously didn't want that movie out there.
Yeah.
And they tried to hide that away, so that's why, probably the original negative of it doesn't exist. I don't know, I'd have to look that up, but they did that probably with a lot of movies. probably a lot of German expressionistic films they weren't too keen on, because they wanted to show, Germany in a consistent positive light, propaganda and all that
Yes,
stuff.
yeah.
Um, but The Last Metro, really great. The Blu-ray, like I said, is from 2009, part of their first, like top 10 movie, first 10 Blu-rays that they put out, somewhere in there. I had to actually go back and look to see what their early stuff was and where they started. Criterion only started putting out Blu-rays in 2008, so they were a little later to the game, as some people, are. But when it comes to special features, there was quite a few interviews. There's one deleted scene. There is a plethora of interviews with Gerard Depardieu and with François Truffaut. There's interviews with one of the actresses, and there's some stuff from French TV programs. There's stuff about the making when it comes to the casting and when it comes to the visual aesthetic, like I talked about in the movie. And there's a short film on here as well. There's a 12-minute short film from 1958, which obviously predates when 400 Blows came out in 1959. And it's really interesting to see, a short film from François Truffaut. What is also interesting in the film is that one of the actors I was recognizing, and I was like, where have I seen this actor before? And it was Jean Poiret, who was in remember the Claude Chabrol films that we had covered with the Claude Chabrol set from Arrow. He was in Copovin, as well as the other one where he was playing the same character, and I was like, oh yeah, he played that kind of harsh Inspector Clouseau, Inspector Lavarden. He played that character around the same time, a few years after he was in this film, and I noticed him, and it was really kind of interesting to see that. He did an interview with along with François Truffaut for a French television program that went for like a long time. I think it was like 25 to 30 minutes, where they talked about their lives, and they talked about being in occupied France during the war and the influence that had on the movie and whatnot. It was really, really good. So this is a really good release. Both of these releases are fantastic. I mean, they're early releases, and I would like to see them maybe get new aesthetics, new UHD editions perhaps, but I'd be perfectly fine with this the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I can agree. Both my editions, very good. As you said, the Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion was a relatively early release as well on Blu-ray, and it looks great. I mean, I would be just happy if this was it. I mean, it looks great. It is a 4K digital restoration, so
yes,
it looks great. But that is it for our first episode of the Unwatched Pile. Of course, this is growing pains, so we're figuring the show out. It might evolve in different ways as we go along, and I'll go ahead and apologize again for the rough start. We have never done a live video feed before, so we were figuring out how to make sure we could both be on the live feed. And I don't know if everybody left us because we didn't. I didn't end up seeing any comments, but hopefully next time we'll make sure that everything's worked out and we're starting at the right time. And
yeah, when it comes to Facebook, it's easier to do stuff on your own than it is to do stuff in groups. I've noticed, especially when it comes to live videos, and it's just unnecessarily complicated. But Steven figured it out.
I figured it out I was surprised I got this. Yeah,
I don't know what was going on.
Yeah, but so next, what we'll do is here soon, probably in the next week, we'll have a new crop of films for you guys to choose from, and of course, some of the ones you didn't vote on for this time might make their way. They'll make their way back out there. And so, but we'll try to keep it fresh, like at least the next time after. So you should get another fresh crop from both of us that you guys will vote on here in the Facebook group, and then we'll do it again next month. So with that said, Andrew, they know where we're found. We don't have to do that whole thing.
Right. This will probably, the audio for this is still going to end up as on the podcast feed.
Yes, it'll be on the Chasing Labels feed. This will pop up here in the next few days or so, so that if you don't if you're not even in this group, of course, you can still listen to it at some point. But we like to let the people in our groups get this first. So with that said, thanks everybody, and till the next pile.
Till the next pile.
We don't have a next.
Don't really have a saying yet.
We don't have an outro yet for this episode, for this show, but I'll come up with one for the next one. And if you guys have any suggestions for an outro, like we do for Chasing Labels, let me know. We'll take suggestions. But thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.